So the monster comes to Victor and says, "Let me be Frankenstein." To which Victor replies, "How can I be Frank if I'm Victor?" I needed to make that one. I am fearless and therefore powerful. Hello, my name is Nico and I'm here today to review Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. Also show a little bit of Junji's Frankenstein. The beautiful setting that I made for today. This is a cranium, dissipated upper body that I created with a mannequin, an hourglass for our time that is quickly vanishing. The lighting for this beautiful picture of Frankenstein. If you like anything surrounding the themes of Gothic literature and you've always felt like you enjoyed some things with monsters or something more scary when you were younger, we're here. Frankenstein came into my hands when I was like around 11 or 12, and I've read it in Portuguese back then, and I really identified myself with the monster in so many ways, but until then, I hadn't read this book again. So I got to the conclusion that I had to go back, especially now after all of these beautiful pictures from Guillermo del Toro's movie coming out on Vanity Fair. Because of these beautiful pictures from Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, I felt very compelled into reading this book again, a book that I've really loved when I was younger, and I still love it now, of course. And also because I'm already in the same line of reading Dracula again. Frankenstein, it's the first time that I've read in English, because when I read it before, it was in Portuguese, and I don't even know which version was it. Mary Shelley was born in London on the 30th of August of 1997. It was her birthday, by the way, and she was the daughter of Mary Wollstonecraft, who wrote A Vindication for the Rights of Women, which I had the opportunity to read on my first year in the course of letters. It was a very interesting piece. And also William Godwin, very influential thinker of the time. She already had the very intellectual waters to swim in when she was younger, but didn't really have the financial security that. And also her mother died shortly after she was born, which was something that they say is something she carried as if it was her fault that her mother died. And later in life, she became the wife of Percy Shelley, which is one of the most famous poets from Romanticism in England, and also because he was a fan of William Godwin, her father. But eventually, she and her stepsister Catherine ran away with Percy Shelley, which was a married guy at the time, and they escaped to the other parts of Europe without really having any financial means to sustain themselves. I'm not even going to go through all the suicides and all of the miscarriages and all of the terrible stuff that happened surrounding Mary Shelley's life, but just know that she's one of the last that survived from Romanticism. Everyone else died, and she's the only one that reached an older age. Her husband was something that I would call nowadays, by today's standards, as a brocialist, like, a guy that wants to say that he's like all of free love, and so he can really have it with everyone, including her sister. And they were even called like Percy and his two wives. He was an incredible poet. But just like the other romanticists, he was a hedonist and he didn't see any limits to the delight he could take out of life. That these romanticists were sort of what the Club of the 27 was during the hippie era. They were like, oh, love and peace, and they wanted to be with each other, and they just kept enjoying the moment. And they were very talented as well, but they they also ended their lives very early due to their lifestyle. They couldn't really go that far living in such a careless manner. Mary Shelley had a lot of miscarriages from him. Only one child survived. Eventually, Percy Shelley became very sick and died in Viareggio, which is a city I had the chance and the opportunity to see. I slept in it when I visited Pisa. I'll put a picture here because I really liked the fact that I got to visit that city. When he was cremated, Mary Shelley kept what she thought was his heart, the remains of his heart, and kept it with her until she died, and it was buried with her, even though it was not really Percy Shelley's heart. So she was Gothic until she died, and with all of her love towards Percy. So in the year 1816, there was a volcanic eruption in Indonesia, and that caused the global temperature to decrease. Of course, they didn't know about that, but in the same year, in July, summer didn't really happen. And this exact same year, Mary Shelley, her husband Percy Shelley, which I'm not sure if he was her husband then, but anyways, her stepsister Catherine, John Polidori, and Lord Byron were united at Villa Diodati in Geneva. And since the weather sucked so much, they didn't really have much to do other than doing orgies and doing nasty things between them. Among this situation in which it was raining a lot, the skies were gray, dreadful for a summer, Byron put forth the position that they should write a scary story, each of them. And out of this came out Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and also John Polidori's The Vampire, which would later influentiate Dracula by Bram Stoker, which I've already reviewed, like I said before. So if you want to check, here I am again with my little candles to announce that I will finally talk about Frankenstein or the modern Prometheus. This link that it makes to Greek mythology. Who was Prometheus? Prometheus was someone that molded and created human beings, and he stole the spark of fire to give it to them from Zeus. So when Zeus finds out about it, he punishes him by tying him to a rock and making an eagle come at him and eat his liver for eternity. So he's not going to ever die, but he's going to suffer for eternity. And I put here a painting that I really like about this, and you can see how raw the situation is. The modern Prometheus starts with Captain Walton on his expedition to the Arctic. He really tried to grab the best sailors he could to go on this expedition with him. They just wanted to see furthest they could go in learning and also of discovering new places. Because take it, this is in the 1700s. He wanted to find many things, and above all things, he wanted to find himself and to find a friend. So this is something we see a lot in the story as well, the company of someone that can share with you your aspirations intellectually and also someone to which you can talk without boundaries, without limits, someone that shares of the same concerns as you do. So in this journey to the Arctic, he finds a man that is on the verge of dying and that is trying to follow a big, big other man or creature on a sledge. But he cannot go any further. He's almost dying. Walton takes him to the boat and takes care of him. Then the captain figures that this guy is a very intelligent guy and he maybe used to be a nobleman, even though he has this madness in his eyes. And he reveals to him that he seeks to have more knowledge and he doesn't see any limits to his desire acquiring knowledge, to which this man really warns him against because that's what made him a damned person. To warn the captain in having no restrictions towards attaining more knowledge, he starts telling his own story. So Victor Frankenstein says everything about his very privileged infancy to everything he's ever lived, how he was rich and he had a great loving family, and eventually went to his downfall. Learn from me, if not by my precepts, at least by my example. How dangerous is the acquirement of knowledge, and how much happier that man is who believes his native town to be the world than he who aspires to become greater than his nature will allow. So we see a lot of influences of Faust by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, and because he's also a guy, a doctor, Dr. Faust, that is seeking knowledge boundlessly, and he even makes a deal with the devil because he wants to acquire as much knowledge as he wishes. But there are consequences, right? Wanting to know more than nature allows beyond God. So interesting, right? Especially in an era in which we have AI and we have knowledge at our hands, and we want to answer as many things as possible, and we cannot bear to ever not know something. But are we really letting those things sink in? What is the use that we are making of this knowledge, right? So Victor was very rich. He had great education. His infancy was spent traveling from place to place. He had a very rich father, a very beautiful mother, and when he finally establishes in a certain place throughout all this journey in Europe, he stays in Geneva, in Switzerland, in the Alps. In this part, in most of the book, we have many characters, but the most important ones are Captain Walton, the father and the mother of Victor Frankenstein, Frankenstein the monster, or in the book, you don't even call it like Frankenstein. He's just the monster. Poor thing doesn't even have a name. Elizabeth Lavenza is a girl that has been adopted by his father and his mother to eventually be his wife, like cousins or some sort. And there is William, his younger brother, Henry Clerval, that is his best friend, and Justin, a servant. So when Victor becomes older, he develops this desire to study. He's going to Ingolstadt in Germany, but he's stopped by the sudden death of his mother, so he still stays a little bit longer in Geneva. So he desires to know more about natural science. But when he first talks to a professor, this professor says that his ideas are very obsolete, so which he doesn't accept until he goes to another one, and this other becomes surprised of his knowledge of these obsolete thinkers. So he gives him a chance to deepen his knowledge on that, as long as he also studies the new ones. But Victor is very stubborn, and he insists that he wants to get deeper into Galvanism, creating life out of that matter. He studies very hard. He becomes known for making a few discoveries, but he doesn't stop until he's able to really accomplish his most wished desire, which was to bring what's dead back to life. By studying so fiercely about these things, he neglects his family, neglects nature, and he neglects even himself. He loses a lot of weight. He starts living in a very undecent manner. Basically, what he wants to do is to go against this natural cycle of life in which we are born, things happen, and you die. Because that's the only thing ever that's going to be similar to all beings on Earth. It doesn't matter what you do in life, who you were, what you did, you were good, you were bad, you were going to die. Yes, of course, nowadays there's people who are doing like procedures and trying to fight against death. You can even reach an anti-aging effect, but I don't think we will ever be able to stay alive. We we shouldn't seek it that much. Sometimes the best thing we can do for ourselves is to not fear death and just find it as a great solace and comforting thing. That is the only thing we are sure of. But he cannot accept it, so he keeps going further with his madness into seeking it. He has his plans really of sort of becoming God and would be the creator of a new species. A new species would bless me as its creator and source. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their being to me. No father could claim the gratitude of his child so completely as I should deserve theirs. Pursuing these reflections, I thought that if I could bestow animation upon lifeless matter, I might, in process of time, although I now find it impossible, renew life where death had apparently devoted the body to corruption. Since he had no limits to those things, he started going after the graves of people and even picking up some animal parts to do the deed. Who shall conceive the horrors of my secret toil as I dabbled among the unhallowed damps of the grave, or tortured the living animal to animate the lifeless clay? My limbs now tremble, and my eyes swim with the remembrance. But then a resistless and almost frantic impulse urged me forward. I seemed to have lost all soul or sensation but for this one pursuit. I collected bones from charnel house and disturbed with profane fingers the tremendous secrets of the human frame. So after so much time dedicated into making this thing becoming alive, the moment he lies his eyes on the creature, he becomes extremely sick and disgusted with his creation, which he abandons. He runs away from the place and starts trying to observe nature again and all things around him, even though he's the hallowed person that went after all of these things to create this being. He keeps putting the blame on the creature itself, and he finally starts to notice things around him again and trying to calm himself down. Doesn't even want to be held accountable for his own misdoings and his actions, and he leaves everything for the sake of destiny and runs through the streets. And surprisingly, on the same day, his friend Henry Clerval has just arrived, and then when he comes back to his place, the creature is nowhere to be seen. He falls sick for a long time, to which Henry takes care of him. When he gets a bit better, William, his young brother, he's been murdered, and they are trying to find who was the person who murdered him. And when they arrive back in Geneva, they have already found the murderer of William, and it's supposedly Justine, a servant that has always served the family and has helped raise William. So that doesn't really make sense to him. The only way that he can find himself is by going back to nature. So here we have the beautiful and immutable truth of nature. All of the horrible feelings he's feeling, doesn't matter the horrible things that is happening to him or to anyone else, nature always remains the same, and he keeps going back to it for consolation. Tingling, long-lost sense of pleasure often came across me during this journey. Some turn in the road, some new object suddenly perceived and recognized, reminded me of days gone by, and were associated with the light-hearted gaiety of boyhood. The very winds whispered in soothing accents, and maternal nature bade me weep no more. Then I spurred on my animal, striving to forget the world, my fears, and more than all, myself. The abrupt sides of vast mountains were before me. The icy wall of the glacier overhung me. A few shattered pines were scattered around, and the solemn silence of this glorious presence chamber of imperial nature was broken only by the brawling waves or the fall of some vast fragments, the thunder sounds of the avalanche, or the cracking reverberated along with the mountains of the accumulated ice, which, through the silent working of immutable laws, was ever and anon rent and torn, as if it had been but a plaything in their hands. These sublime and magnificent scenes afforded me the greatest consolation that I was capable of receiving. Our thoughts keep changing over and over again, because we are humans and we have conscience, and this conscience is kind of something that perpetuates and can either be something very good for you, but it can also poison someone else's spirit, mood, and we cannot escape from our own thoughts. And to me, this is also a reference to something that is mentioned further on the book, which is another book called Paradise Lost. So I've already mentioned this in my review of The Doors of Perception, and in Paradise Lost by John Milton, it talks about when you have something in your mind and you cannot escape from it. It doesn't matter where you go. This is already poisoning your thoughts. So it's in Paradise Lost, Book 1, verses 254 and 255. The mind is its own place and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. I love this one. It's true. We really choose what we put in our minds and what we think. But sometimes we just seem to let these things flow and take us with it instead of just watching it pass by. Just watch the thoughts go without being taken with the stream of consciousness. What Victor says that links back to this in Paradise Lost is, why does man boast of sensibilities superior to those apparent in the brute? It only renders them more necessary beings. If our impulses were confined to hunger, thirst, and desire, we might be nearly free. But now we are moved by every wind that blows and the chance word or seeing that word may convey to us. So any words can change your moods, can change what you think, can change your relation to everything around you. So while Victor is thinking these things, he's approached by the monster in the middle of the snow. And even though, like, usually when we see Frankenstein in many pieces, he's portrayed as something incapable of talking, that's dumb. The monster itself is very well articulated, and he learns everything by himself. That's already something super impressive. But when he approaches Victor and wishes to talk to him, Victor refuses and abhors him and wishes him to disappear from the face of the earth. So the monster comes to Victor Frankenstein and says, "Let me be Frankenstein." To which Victor replies, "How can I be Frank if I'm Victor?" But now, being real and not talking shit, he is very well articulated. He wants to really tell his story, to which Victor doesn't want to hear. But after insisting a lot, he complies. So upon being abandoned by Victor in the lab, he escapes, right? He runs away, and then he starts noticing that people don't really like him and they all feel disgusted towards his appearance. So he wanders around the streets and escapes to the forest, to the outskirts of Ingolstadt, and finds a cabin. And then when he finds this cabin, he just decides to live isolated because he could live on some berries. He didn't really have to hunt. And because this cabin has hold to another house, he starts observing a family of French people. And then he starts learning the language with them, and he makes some reflections on the language, on the way that he is discovering the words that they use little by little, and overall just being very admired towards them, their affection with each other, and how nice they are to everyone that comes ask them for help. But he knows that if he did, they wouldn't like him. He knows he cannot show up, but he develops a sort of affection towards them, and he starts doing things to help them out. So he leaves some wood for their firing. He tries to do kind stuff for them without them seeing him. This also makes me think of something that the book brings up, which is the creature has never had the chance of having a formal education, not even a basic education. It was self-taught. So despite not having any formal education, the creature gets to learn a lot just by observing the world around it, and also by reading powerful books that gives him plenty to learn and reflect upon. And one day when he's coming back from this walk, he finds 3 books laying around in the woods. 3 books are Paradise Lost by John Milton, The Sorrows of Werther by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe as well. And the other one is Plutarch's Lives. That one I haven't read, but it learns to reflect on the histories of the founders of ancient republics, and also to learn a little bit about past ages and develop better his experience. But then it's within that resonated the most with him is definitely Paradise Lost. Because just like the fallen angel, he thought that he was deserted from everything and nothing was given to him. Even though he relates to Satan in the story of Paradise Lost because he's the fallen angel and he couldn't participate in heaven, at least Satan in Paradise Lost had his fellow friends that supported him on being deserted from heaven. But Frankenstein didn't have anyone with him, which made his situation worse. And with this, he's always lamenting his existence. And if it's already a very heavy load for us people, the human condition in general is already enough for us to crave death and not existing. Now imagine being born as a loathsome, lonely monster that even your creator abandoned. To this, Frankenstein says, "Hateful day when I received life," I exclaimed in agony. "Accursed creator, why did you form a monster so hideous that even you turned from me in disgust? God, in pity, made man beautiful and alluring, after his own image. But my form is a filthy type of yours, more horrid even from the very resemblance. Satan had his companions, fellow devils, to admire and encourage him, but I am solitary and abhorred." So he also starts feeling the misery of knowing too much as well, because if he at least didn't know why he was being feared and he only existed as an animal, maybe he wouldn't suffer as much. Which brings me back again to his deformity. So he was very used to admiring the physical form of his cottagers, and when he has a look at his reflection, he says, "At first I started back, unable to believe that it was indeed I who was reflected in the mirror. And when I became fully convinced that I was in reality the monster that I am, I was filled with the bitterest sensations of despondence and mortification. I did not yet entirely know the fatal effects of this miserable deformity." He craved so much knowledge and being able to communicate, so maybe showing that he was articulate to the cottagers would make them not fear him as much, but at the same time he knew that his appearance would not allow any sort of connection. So one day he sees that all the other cottagers left the cottage and only the blind old man stood there. So he went to talk to him and he revealed himself. He was very honest about who he was, and the old man was very sympathetic to him. But as soon as the other cottagers came back and saw him by this man's feet, they hid him and not even allowing him to talk to them and to connect, just because of his appearance. So well, after all of these things happen, he goes through other situations in which people judge him by his appearance. And since he got some quotes from Victor's own closet, he had some annotations of how he was created. And then he went to Geneva in hopes to find his creator. And one day, and then a kid passed by, and then this kid started telling him of how disgusting he looked, how dreadful he was. When he sees this little boy, he just wants to take him with him and teach him things, because since he was a kid, he wouldn't have that much prejudice towards him being a monster rather than the other human beings. So initially he wanted really just company. But upon finding out that this boy was the brother of Victor Frankenstein, it was William, strangled the little boy, put the picture that he was carrying in Justine's pocket, which he found lying somewhere. So he did this intentionally. But to explain himself to Victor, he says that he did this out of revenge, having been left into the world to his own luck without ever being taught anything and without any assistance of his own creator. So he had the notion of how horrible was this act that he committed. And he was not exactly asking for forgiveness from Victor, but because he also acknowledges that what Victor did to him is horrid, and he doesn't even want to take the creature in after putting it into the world. So he's talking about himself and why he deserves to have a partner. He says, I am alone and miserable. Men will not associate with me. But one as deformed and horrible as myself would not deny herself to me. My companion must be of the same species and have the same defects. This being you must create. And after very convincing statements and arguments, he convinces Victor to do so. Victor keeps protesting that if he created another evil being, it will be as bad as he, and they would destroy everyone, and no one will be able to do anything about it. Since the only thing he ever experienced was violence and mistreatment, how could he ever deal with the world? Which brings us to Jean-Jacques Rousseau, also from Geneva, where Frankenstein was written, and also where the story is taking place at most part of the time. Makes it seem like there was a huge influence by him on the moral of the novel. And Rousseau, in the social contract in particular, says that human being is born good, and then society corrupts them. That is up to debate, but in here it doesn't matter what I think, what you think. This is the philosophy of the novel. On my behalf, I could say I agree in parts. I also do believe that there are people who have some seed of evil in them, but who am I? I'm nothing. But I still believe that the environment in which you are raised in and the way people treat you molds you into the ways you act, because we are used to mirror the behavior of those around us. Anyways, Victor finally accepts to build the monster for him, and when he's almost finishing the female creature, he takes a look at the monster, observing him from afar, and then he starts dismembering everything. And then the creature becomes terrified and wants to know why is he doing that. Shall each man find a wife for his bosom, and each beast have his mate, and I be alone? I had feelings of affection, and they were requited by detestation and scorn. Man, you may hate, but beware. Your hours will pass in dread and misery, and soon the bolt will fall which must ravish from your happiness forever. Are you to be happy while I grovel in the intensity of my wretchedness? You can bless my other passions, but revenge remains. I may die, but first you, my tyrant and tormentor, shall curse the sun that gazes on your misery. Beware, for I am fearless, and therefore powerful. I will watch with the willingness of a snake, that I may sting with its venom. Man, you shall repent the injuries you inflict. So, right after that, he kills his friend Henry. And then Victor is almost charged with his murder, but he can prove that he was not guilty, he was innocent. And then he goes back to Geneva to marry Elizabeth. So here we have him not allowing the creature that he brought into this world against their will, more like anyone else, because it was not even a live matter, it was not even made with love, it was someone without father, without mother, without a family. And then, while he doesn't think this creature is deserving of someone, he goes and marries Elizabeth, that his partner that has been promised for him for his entire life. For this, Frankenstein had promised that he would be with him on the night of his wedding. He hears the screams, and the creature had just strangled Elizabeth to death and is running away. And then we are back to him in the cabin, almost dying, with Captain Walton. And then the creature appears in there and laments it when Victor dies. It was not the creature's intention for Victor to die so soon. Captain Walton, even though he's very disturbed by the creature's appearance, tries to talk to them. The creature just says that he wanted connection, wanted what the captain wanted at first, anyways. It's not very clear if the creature commits suicide, but I don't think the creature would last in that region either. Who knows? Of throwing everything away out of vanity. Victor is someone that had everything from birth. He had a rich father, a beautiful mother, state. He sacrificed everyone he ever loved. While the creature was born with nothing. He was born miserable. He was put into the world out of curse. But at the same time, the creature learned to love nature by itself, to observe everyone, to acquire a level of knowledge that is truly admirable for someone that was self-taught, with something that Victor had always had for himself. Isn't this what all of us want? Everyone wants to be able to have an equal, to have someone to which you can relate to. It's also interesting because more than ever nowadays we live in a world of appearances in which many people say cosmetic procedures, which I'm not condemning here, anything of this, but people take much more care of their appearance than of their minds. They care more about looking beautiful or looking like something and performing something rather than truly being. Frankenstein is the complete definition of the opposite. He's an incredible, empathetic, gentle being that only resorts to violence and to revenge when the entire world despised him. This also makes me think of parents who want their kids to be an extension of them and not to have a life of their own. And without any sort of affection, they just think that their children owe them something, but they never do any efforts in gaining their children's affection. And this also takes me to a quote from the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas by Brazilian author Machado de Assis, which says, "I had no children. I did not transmit to any creature the legacy of our misery." If you're not someone willing to give a good life to your children, why even giving them life? Just to be miserable as well? I don't see a point. I only see that Victor is the real villain. He put everything at stake out of narcissistic impulses of overcoming life and death. Oh, but Frankenstein did kill his family. Well, Frankenstein was put into the world without anyone ever guiding him. It's not that what he did is right. Was he ever taught any good? I don't think so. Something else that I would like to talk about is the authorship of the novel by Mary Shelley. Some people still contest that was Percy Shelley that could have written it. Some people cannot believe that a young girl could have done that for some reason, right? What reason could it be? If he did anything on his novel, he was just the editor and advisor. And we have so many other women that truly did the work and men took the credit for it. So go after those maybe, right? Not one that has been proven to have been the woman who wrote it. If he did do any alterations in the novel, was 3,000 words out of 72,000? Come on, are you fucking joking? So, under a stylometric analysis, it was proved that it's her style. Of course, they would share things that they read. They were married, they would talk about the same stuff. And if it's not for that, you can check Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own. And there are so many other men throughout history that took credit for things that their wives did. And so many more that we won't ever find out about. So we have Marie Curie, we have Hedy Lamarr, we had Josephine Hopper, which also painted Bronte sisters. Of course, women would have to publish things at first in other person's name. If people still contest their authorship nowadays, imagine it back then. It's a shame, but it is true. Your appearance can really make people contest the things you are capable of being, or doing, or feeling, just like Frankenstein. So I think it extends to that as well. No wonder it's a classic, you know. If you don't think I have enough time to dig into Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, there's also Manga by Junji. There's like very minor things that change. The female creature is actually created by Victor. This is the female creature she's created in Junji Ito's version. But it's also very sad. I will not give spoilers, but it's sad when you're not accepted at all. Not even by your own kind. Oops, I gave a spoiler. Well, if you want to get to know the story of Frankenstein, but you wish it to be at a quicker pace, I totally recommend Junji Ito's manga on Frankenstein. You should get that one. Yeah, so that's it. You should check the version of Frankenstein from 1933 or 31, and also one done by no one else than Thomas Edison in 1910, which is awesome. It's 16 minutes long, and you can watch it on YouTube. So yeah, that was my very small contributions to the legacy of Mary Shelley and Gothic novels, and maybe science fiction as an extension of it. The review really took me a long time, so thank you very much for watching all of it.